Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody out there in podcast land. You are in tune to another episode of Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective. This is Hamza.
And I am David.
And today I was excited about speaking with our guest, and then I thought, oh my goodness, I have more homework to do because I am familiar with the springtime when we do spring cleaning, when we evaluate our lives. But our guest today is going to talk about it's time for a fall friendship cleanse as well. And so shout out to everybody in the dating world. We are in the middle of cuffing season, and I think that you guys will really love this podcast because we are talking about just different things that you could do to filter and evaluate what's currently going on to your life and what needs to be jettisoned or what needs to be cut off. But I am not the expert in that area, and that's why we have Annie Evans. She is a world-renowned author. She has actually been a celestial navigator before GPS, traveling 44,000 logged sea miles. She has a story to tell for sure. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Annie Evans to the podcast. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you, guys. It's really great to be here, and I really don't believe that we should be falling into everybody else's negativity. So I guess that's what we're going to be talking about this morning.
Yeah, I think that we're going to talk about some balance. And right now that we may be in an imbalance with everything you turn on, it seems like it is taking that negative slant. And maybe you can help us kind of cut that off at the path so we can kind of avoid and not get drawn in to something that may not be productive in our current lives.
Exactly. So I think so many of us get caught up in just following, reactively to our friends and families. And like you say, everything that's bombarding us from outside. And so the first thing you mentioned, balance, and I think that's key for all of us to just get in touch with our own balance. And when it gets threatened by negativity, some people just fall into patterns of always being overly judgmental or argumentative, and we just need to really preserve our space and just keep our own Quan, so to speak. I hope many people can recognize that word. And it's important just not to get caught up and feed into getting these negative reactions, which just end up really constricting and frustrating our whole lives. I hope that's making sense.
Yeah, and that's why I was really interested in speaking with you, because when you talk to people, they may not even realize it. And you talk about if you don't clean these people out or evaluate what's going on in your life, you actually turn out to be just like them. So you get drawn into the negativity, and you're like, wow, I can't even pinpoint when I started thinking like this.
Exactly. That's so true. So I remember in my past, because I pretty much call people out now when it starts happening, and I welcome being called out also, because we can all be guilty of taking a negative or disrespectful slant here and there, but just bringing it to the other's attention and just not being willing to go there with the other people. And it's a practice, because we just sort of automatically, okay, he said that, and that didn't feel so great, but now I'm going to say this, and that's not going to feel so great to him. And it's like a tennis match where, everybody's missing balls and causing problems. So it's just really important to be really centered in ourselves and try and stay positive. And I really recommend just really, not reacting as, like, oh my God, if you don't stop this, but more like, listen, I want to hear you and I want to be heard, but let's just, breathe, take a deep breath and really get back onto where we're just communicating rather than, alienating each other. So It does take practice because we are so used to just automatically being reactive and just reacting back. We reflect what's usually put upon us, and we can train ourselves to not do that.
Now, I like what you said about what life reflects what we're currently thinking about. What we focus on expands. From a technological standpoint with social media, their job is to keep you on those sites. So if you start clicking on negative stories or you're responding to negative responses other people are giving out, the algorithm is trained to give you more of that because you are actively participating in that energy.
That's exactly true. I have to say I'm still guilty, although at least I'm conscious of it. I like to be aware of what's going on and what other people are thinking. And so against my better judgment, although I still just decide that I am going to watch some of this stuff, but I put it through my own filters, and I'd rather know that a storm is coming than to go, I'm not going to watch that. So, but we really do have to reflect and filter out what isn't good for us. So that's where I hold my boundaries. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being aware of what's going on outside of our lives.
Absolutely. And so you are obviously an expert in this area. So were you born that way? I'm sure you have stories to tell of how you were able to break the threshold to the space that you're in now. Was that more of your upbringing or your formative years, or just something of a recent development?
Well, it's recent that I've been called to really share with other people and try and help them. But I was brought up in I had very good and very, very bad. And so my mother was mentally ill, although until I was in my teens, nobody acknowledged it. But I was getting the brunt of her illness the whole time. It was really pretty horrible. And at the same time, I lived in Yosemite and had great life skiing and just being in the nature of it all. But when I got in my late teens, I realized, actually I didn't realize for a long time, but finally I realized how angry I was. And I had every right to be. I had really suffered some really bad wrongs. But I wanted to be, a productive, happy person. And when I finally realized how angry and the chip on my shoulder was so big, that I just really sought out, how can I change myself? And really, because I finally it was seeing the reactions of other people that could have helped me with, starting careers and all of these things. And they're just like going, oh, no, this isn't something I want to get into. And so it took some years. I found a small book by David K. Reynolds, who was the founder, creator of constructive living. He's a psychoanalyst, and he mixed Eastern philosophies, Narita, and, oh, my God, my mind went blank on the other one. And this book was so simple, and I was in a state of real depression and just really finding it hard to be productive. Washing the dishes wasn't happening. And so I instantly this really makes sense. All I need to do is set those feelings aside just for a few minutes a day and do something productive, like washing the dishes. And so it took time, but slowly but surely, the positives totally erased the negatives. I mean, I still have bad memories, and I still have all those things. It's not like they're gone, but my mind and my subconscious do not react to them in the same way. And I take time. Like, I just lost my most precious stepfather. He was 88, so he had a good life. and he was on a bicycle and he got hit by a car and was instantly killed. But he's part of why I am who I am, because he was such an amazing human being. And so it's so hard to lose somebody like that. So I grieve, and I spend time doing that, but I make sure I balance it with really, keep going, put the next foot forward. So as you may or may not know, I have gone through so many things. I've been widowed twice. And at the same time, I've just been really successful. And I just know that people hopefully don't have to go through everything I have gone through, but everybody has the opportunity to take charge of their lives and live the life that they want. And, but it does sometimes take major practice. So now I am really trying to reach out and help people who've lost their homes in fires and all different things. Some people can just snap back up and go, okay, well, where's the next house? But other people, it's like their lives are completely ruined. And so I'm trying to lift them up and teach them that with practice they can just really retrain their brain to think differently.
First off, let's say condolences to you for your stepfather.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a tough one, unexpected, and yeah.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's one of those that I liked from your YouTube videos and others. Tomorrow's not guaranteed, so I'm sure he didn't get on that bike thinking he was going to reach that outcome. I don't think anyone does when they start today, and so you're going through that. So condolences to you for that. The other thing I wanted to ask you, because you're talking about being resilient. You are in California right now, and those that I'm in Atlanta, David's in Colorado, and we get sound bites. So what's it like on the front lines of the forest fires out there?
I can hear helicopters as we speak. I am not in a current fire area. My area was hit really, really hard in the end of in November 2017, and I watched 11 houses burn right from my front yard. But I've been around fires, all my life. Nothing like this. It just never was like this. We'd have, an occasional big fire. But right now I have people all over Southern and Northern California that are just directly impacted, people that lost their houses in Paradise, Malibu. It's just extraordinary. And I just drove through Santa Clarita, where one of the biggest fires is right ongoing now. I think the Tick Fire. I believe that fire is somewhat under control, and many people have been able to go back home, and yet it's still just flaming the whole area. And it's calm right now. The winds are calm, but we're expecting, 45 to 85 mile an hour winds starting tonight and all through tomorrow. Hopefully that won't happen, but so I've become somewhat of a, I know that I'll be okay. That's going through all these things. My bounce back muscles are really built up, and I'm fairly prepared. I have solar charger, I have satellite phones, and I'm ready to jump in the car with my dog. And if I lose my house, there will be another house. But that's not the way other people lived. And it really is life-threatening. Just your whole mentality and feelings of security and safety, which all of us need. So my whole thing is that I want to share with other people how you can really build up these muscles. And nobody wants to go through these things, but so when I was first widowed, the boat actually got lost at sea. I don't know if you know that, with all souls on board, my loved ones and everything. that I basically owned and my history. And it was a moment of like, oh, my life is over. And then I went, God, I'm really young. I really need to live this life that I have ahead of me. And so that's what really got me totally focused on, no matter what happens, I'm going to sit down and grieve, pull the covers over my head for however long, but then I'm going to whip them back and put my best foot forward and go on into life. And so that's what I've done over and over. And I'm hoping that the fact that people can see that I've really done it and now I'm really living the good life, and until the next thing happens. Just kidding. I hope it doesn't. But we all can be resilient, and we can train ourselves to be prepared to be resilient, and that's what I think is missing in a lot of people.
How long was that grieving period, Annie?
Well, it's hard to, still sometimes it comes up, and I do let these things come back up. I'd rather deal with them when they, because a lot of times it starts with just some great memory. I mean, sailing at sea for the years that I did with the dolphins and the islands and the beautiful cultures and everything, those are all really good memories. And then you have, a hard ending, just like with my stepfather. And it doesn't make all those good memories go away. So the period of grief with the boat, I think, was the longest that I really ever had. It was probably a few months.
A few months? Okay.
Yeah. Since then, I've been known to get up the next day from a major disaster and just go, I just got to get on with it. And but that was my learning process, and also it was a very big deal. I've been through a few big deals, but whatever the period is, at that time I really hadn't acknowledged the need to consciously fight for life. So my grieving period at that time was longer because that was when I was learning, no, this is not the way you're going to live the rest of your life with your head under the covers and, completely destroyed by grief. And I still have a lot of survivor's guilt because being the navigator, first mate, partner, it's like, what if I was there? What if I was there? That still comes up. But more importantly is my life today. I want to live the best life I can live. So just with that thinking and with the practice, it really does come faster and faster. And I just don't. I'll get mad and I'll stand up and for my rights and go to court for a parking ticket or something, but I just don't have the anger, and it just goes away so quickly because I've just always insisted that my brain think positive things, and I've really dealt a lot with my limiting beliefs and everything in my subconscious. So my subconscious is filled with positive things, and everything gets more condensed, and I'm more constantly able to set my feelings aside. Even with my stepfather, it's horrible, and I can hear it in my voice. It's shaking, and yet today's going to be a productive day, and I'm going to be happy, and I know he wants me to be happy. So that's my story. And as Les Brown would say, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to put an asterisk on that for that answer. And I wanted to know if you sought out other groups of going through that, because one thing that we haven't talked about on this podcast in great detail is that survivor's guilt. I was just there, and then this happened, and then talking about grief. And then the other side of that is, an outsider that wasn't around that, or, a degree away from it. And they're like, well, how come you haven't gotten over it already? I mean, that's no one that's going through grief or survivor's guilt wants to think that there's this arbitrary timeline that they should get over something. So when you answered that, was that on the basis of going to different groups of sharing experiences, or how did you get to it?
Most of it was more survival. Now, I would never, I am really counseling people, and I would never say, you should be over this by now. You never, my point is you never get over these things. It's how they fit into your future life that we need to look at. I did not go to a lot of groups. I'm not saying that I didn't get help from, I've been really fortunate in the people that have surrounded me. And so I did get help, but I wasn't really going to groups or getting counseling or therapists. After dealing with my mother and mental illness, and then I also lost my brother to mental illness, I not really easily trusting a general therapy, let's just put it wildly. But at the same time, I am really supportive of other people. I try and be there for other people who have been going through things like this. And back to this whole thing of why you reached out to me about the negativity and everything. So many people are in relationships where for years they're put down, there's just no respect and understanding, no mutual just support. And, I am in a lot of groups now where, it's like, 14 years, and I'm going, you've got to do something about this. Is your life, your one life, and you're going to just subject yourself to this real negative blankety blank. You've got to stand up for yourself. Otherwise, you only have yourself to blame. It's not the other person. Sure it is, and if you can get them to change and realize, somehow mirror to them what they're doing to you, then great. But otherwise, you have to just evacuate, which is a key word these days here.
Annie, before we go forward, if you could if you're on Wi-Fi, if you could just go to data, because I'm hearing background information. If you could do that as well, David, there's just interference in the background.
Go to data.
Or take it off of speaker. Go to data and take it off of speaker, because with the three of us, there's some interference in the background.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
It's hard for me to hold this phone up. Give me a second.
We got the interference gone, so it may have been on David's side.
Okay. Well, my speaker's still on. I'll turn it off. It's off now, so hopefully that helps. But now I'm holding the phone up to my ear.
Sure, not very helpful, and having your phone up to your ear. So I wanted to ask another question, because with this being a celestial navigator, it made me think of when you finish high school or you finish college and you take that year off and go to Europe and such. And I wanted to know if you becoming a navigator and sailing the seas, was that a result of getting away from your immediate family environment?
That's a good question. So my father was a Harvard grad and was really wanting me to follow the norm of the day, which was, really good college, which he would have supported at the time, and really good job, get married. And I was a little bit rebellious, and it wasn't so much trying to get away, but just the need for feeling free. And so I really started living an adventurous life. I did go to Ireland, and I was studying to be a horse trainer and teacher of riding, and which I have done for many years in the past. And so that led me just on a loop-de-loop through adventure. And so I fell in love with the person that was building this boat and became part of that family. And that's how I ended up sailing. I don't think I was really running away from anything, but I was running into, the want of adventure. And I've lived a lot of my life. My life has never been about the money, but it's been about, really feeling good about what I was doing, being useful, productive. And there was nothing wrong with following the stars, because it's pretty awesome out there in the middle of the ocean when it's calm and the universe is just above you and the dolphins are breathing alongside you. So I did, when I was 12, I did run away from my mother, who had tried to attack me with a butcher knife. And at 12, I ran all the way across the country, which was an adventure in itself. I guess I got addicted to adventure. But after that, I don't think I've really run away from anything. If there's something I wanted to do, I ran towards it and did whatever I had to do in order to make it happen.
Absolutely. And on one of your videos, you're talking about the difference of living on a boat versus a house, and you can't have that much baggage on a boat. So maybe it made it easier for you to let some of that baggage go that others take more time with.
Well, that's, what was on that boat actually, because I come from a, family that goes back to the Mayflower and before, and that in Jamestown and the resettlement of, or not the resettlement, but the settlement of all of Pennsylvania and everything. And so I had a lot of heirlooms, and I had them on that boat. Now, and that was only one time. I've actually lost huge amounts of things that are just totally irreplaceable at a certain point, but I didn't need them to live. And so, yeah, you have to let things go. When they're gone, they're gone. But it doesn't make it, easier. I mean, now, because I'm writing these books and really trying to share my story, I am really, treasuring the pictures and things that I have. And I see pictures of my grandmother's quilts and stuff, and it's hard. But such is life.
Yeah, that's definitely. Sorry for those losses. Before you had come on, David and I were talking about heirlooms, and I'm in the process of, I'm a twin, and my sister's daughter just had twins. So we were like, for lineage, we want to have pictures of the twins together. And those pictures aren't even formed yet. And like you're saying, there may come a time where that picture's lost in the ether. So it's important to us today, but, like you just said, sometimes those attachments, sometimes you have to let them go, sometimes without your control.
Yes. And seriously, and right now, there's a couple pictures that are in my mind that why don't I have those pictures? It's really, when you're trying to tell your story, there's nothing better than a real picture, like the boat being in full sail and things like that. And then also because I was living on a boat, a lot of the pictures, there's mildew and other things, and they're old, and they're not from current technology. So it's really tough, but you just have to find a workaround. That's all I can say is, make the best of what you have. And thankfully, I do have some pictures.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I definitely have my hard drive and everything in the car now because I don't want to go through this again.
Yeah. Annie, what was it like? I know in the video I saw that you talked about how you had been away from the United States for about a 5-year period, or at least for 5 years, and when you went back, and then I don't know how long after when you came back, you found out about what happened, with the boat and whatnot. But the question I wanted to ask you, when you were away that long, when you came back, what were some of the things that you noticed about the United States that maybe you hadn't noticed just being, from this country?
Well, you're always thinking about hamburgers and stupid things when you're that far away, and hamburgers are never the same. Actually, they've gotten better over the years in other countries, and I say that just because it came up, but hamburgers aren't really my thing. But still, when you haven't had one for 5 years, a nice, good one, you do want one. But so, when I came back, there were so many friends, and the circle of the sailing people that I was with, it was just great to be with them because we had a land base here in Camarillo, California. And it was hard. When I was overseas, I made a living somewhat. It was my spending money. Making custom dresses and stuff, in the various tourist places. And so that's what I started doing right away when I got back and knew I had to, start over. And my whole career actually blossomed from that. And, I think I lived in the present, so I didn't really ponder on. Now I miss Tahiti. That's where I left. I could have lived there forever, but I don't judge the United States against the other countries. I've been a world traveler before and ever since, and I'm always glad to come home, and yet I'm always sorry to leave the place that I like. So I guess I just don't relate to the question too much. I think now, if it had been as many years, like 20 years or something, then it would have been probably a big shock. But, life just keeps unraveling, and you just have to be there in the present.
Yeah. And the only reason I asked is I've always just been curious to, when you're from one place and you've been there most of your life, there's a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily recognize that others from other countries, when they come here, they might say, and it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but just, they might say, oh, everything is so whatever here in the U.S., and we might not even blink about that because that's how our experience has always been. So that's why I had asked that. You being away for so many years, maybe when you came back, you noticed, what, Americans, we're so this or that. Not necessarily a bad thing, but just maybe some things you just hadn't noticed because it was always like that. And then being away for 5 years, maybe you just, like I said, noticed things that you never noticed before.
Well, one thing came up that I did notice is that because I had flown in and out of the United States many times before that, and we were in just so smoggy, and the skies were always gray, and I did notice that there had been a lot of cleanup and that the skies were bluer, and I was going, wow, it's not so bad that I came back here, because honestly that was one of the things that was really bothering me about living here. Before I went sailing. And now I see the dark skies coming back, and it's really alarming to me. The fires aren't helping, and some of the environmental impact things going on are not helping. But that's something I really noticed, and I was really grateful to see the blue skies, and I hope to see them again. But I also have moved around my whole life, so I haven't gotten too stuck, and stuck is the wrong word. But, I've always kind of gone with the flow because I've moved all over California. I know California better than most, let's just say. And I'm all over California. I'm a realtor, and most realtors are like, I'm in this community. And I'm going, where do you let me tell you, there's all sorts of places that you can be. And I really get into people to try and get them in the right place. And it can be anywhere in California. And maybe elsewhere when I get licensed in other places. So I'm just kind of a little bit different person from, I see so many. I lived in Malibu, and there were people that I was going to school with who had never been out of San Fernando Valley. So I'm thinking, there's a lot of people that are really in one place. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're happy there. I think it's a good thing to look at and make sure that you're really directing your life and life isn't directing you, or your environment isn't ruling your life. So I really teach people to recognize their strengths and address their weaknesses and really look at what kind of life they really want to live, and then work on an action plan of how to make that happen. And again, that goes back to maybe possibly having to get rid of some people in your life, at least not spend as much time in their thrall, so to speak. And hopefully you can work it out with people and move on and create a new relationship with them and become better people all in all. So that's my whole thing that I try and help people with.
Sure. And I was just wondering with popular media in the past couple of weeks, or first, today, Google, whenever you go to Google, they have an image and it talks about what happened today. And it's really good from a historical standpoint because you may learn something that you didn't know before. And today, Sylvia Plath was born. And a couple of weeks ago, I think it was 2020, they highlighted Phil Hartman because it was the anniversary of when he died, based off of between the relationship he had with his wife, Bryn. And I bring those two up because you had formed a 501c3 for your late brother, and I was wondering if you stay in touch or on top of what's happening to popular media with regards to mental illness.
Well, that's a really big thing for me right now. I really advocate for improving how we look at and deal with mental illness. I think it's a national crisis, and all the homelessness and PTSD and everything. We just leave people on the streets, and it's really hurtful to me. And I think it's a lot unnecessary. And so suddenly it's dawned upon. I'm totally. Yeah, I have a high school degree, and I've done so many things. I've been in senior corporate management, really running businesses and growing businesses. But education just isn't really serving most people because we don't teach people to be whole. I think if we really taught people to be whole human beings and address, problem solving, financially, knowing how to manage your finances, knowing, mindfulness and how to really recognize when your mind is going in directions that you feel you don't have any control of. I feel that you do have some control of. Everybody can't control everything. But I just got back from Kenya, and I went over there with the Unstoppable Foundation. And those kids that they have been helping for the past 11 15 years or so, are so amazing, and they're taught, a curriculum that teaches them to be completely whole human beings, and they have nothing. They're poor people, and yet they could come over here and speak on any stages. I was able to go to the first college level graduation, and they were speaking to us, and I'm just going, I got to bring these girls over, so that they can speak over here, because we're just not bringing up people with the right tools. So I believe that, first of all, mental illness can be somewhat self-corrected. I feel that I've done a lot of self-correcting. I never have depression or anything anymore, or if it is, it's hours and hardly days, not months and years. And, there's so much we can do, and there's so much that we really could be serving mental illness with proper hospitals and, not just handing out medication, because the side effects and everything of that, we need to teach people how to manage their own mental issues. And some are very unmanageable. I was just on a call with Les Brown yesterday, and his son is schizophrenic, and he's really panicked. And I so live in that space where you actually have to let go of people when they're not willing to take charge and take medication or do anything for themselves. And, my heart bleeds every time for so many people, including my brother and my mother.
One of my biggest takeaways in watching the Phil Hartman story, when they were talking about his wife Bryn, and they were also we also had a guest recently who had lost someone, and she was dealing with depression too. And one of the biggest takeaways was the side effects from the medication, and
right.
With the mass shootings and such, it was a side effect of a medication. And so it sounds like you're a good conduit between the traditional treatment and looking at alternative to complement each other, as opposed to just being on separate ends of the fence to deal with these issues.
Absolutely. So I think that one of the main problems is I'm not against medication. I really wish my brother had spent more time on medication. He spent about a week, and it was a week where he became positive, and I saw my brother come back to life. But then he, legally could fight it because he was taking it under court order. And so he never did. And he just spiraled downward. And within, 7 months or so, he died. And not from mental illness exactly, but because he didn't treat anything else. And although it was treatable. So it's really scary. And, the HIPAA laws and everything, I think, need some adjustment because, I know my family would have done anything to try and help save him. And, you put a totally mentally ill person, schizophrenic, paranoid schizophrenic, and say that, okay, you can be in charge of your own life. And, yeah, I get it. I'm not totally opposed to it, but, they need help. And, and it's like you can't even help the person. So it's really, I'm just hoping that as things, mindfulness and all the teachings going on are so valuable, and they need to filter down into our whole society to where we're looking at things as a whole picture and not just, fragment this. And the other main point is that with our health insurance and everything, doctors and psychiatrists and everybody are only given a few minutes for each person. Nobody's really getting therapy unless you're, super rich. And so, they just hand out medication. They get feed residuals from the pharma companies, and the whole thing is just not a working situation. It's really bad. And I'm talking to a lot of people who are on medication, and, they're just going, this is really miserable. I know I'm not really me. And, yeah, it's helping, but it's also ruining my life. And I saw it with the side effects I saw with my mother were just beyond, it's just a horror show altogether. So we have a long ways to go. We have a lot of problems, and this is really becoming, as I'm sure that you're not here in California where it's probably the worst, but the homelessness and the people being left behind is just getting to be too outrageous.
You packaged a lot on that, and one thing I'd like to ask to unpack some of it is the challenge that I've seen as an outsider is that if they're on medication, they don't like that they're on it, and then when they get off, they're like, I feel great, and then that's when they spiral out. So that's when someone's on medication. Now, dealing with your mom and your brother, and for, like you're saying, when we filter people out in this fall season, how would you determine any emotional indicators or how a person's acting that you may want to suggest, hey, because nobody wants to hear you need treatment, but are there any indicators that you could say that we could look out for, this is kind of indicative of this type of behavior for mental illness and maybe professional help should be sought out?
Well, I think that one of the saddest things is that people with severe mental illness, which may not, I know with my brother it wasn't severe at first, and he was really, really normal for most of his life and the closest thing to me. But, when mental illness takes hold, especially schizophrenia and related disorders, they're in complete denial. There's really not much you can say to a person. You cannot approach it with, well, I just noticed that, you have these symptoms and you might want to look at it. I just don't think most people will just reject it. And I have people, I've tried to hire people even to help them have a job and stuff, who I knew were on the border of having real issues. And I've had to let them go most of the time because they don't face it. And there's nothing I can do other than ruin my life to try and help them. And, that's the hard thing. So there has to be another way that I don't really have all the answers to reach people and approach people. And one of them is if we were really teaching people from a very young age, this is my belief, to really watch out for these things, they could self-correct many things before it got to be an issue. And if they couldn't self-correct it, they would probably have a better reason to seek the proper treatment. And hopefully that's available because I just don't think it's available enough.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you knew this or not. Annie. There is. I'm in the tech space, and so I'm always interested, like most people, about artificial intelligence and such. And so there are applications that they're trying out with determining when a child under the age of 8, they would run them through this machine, or they would speak through a microphone. And based off of their inflections, the AI can determine if this person has depression or anxiety, because the stats continue to grow. I mean, the stats for anxiety and depression over the last 10 years it's never been at this level. So at least we can identify that it is an issue. And I'm not saying artificial intelligence is an answer, but I think that many people, including yourself, are fighting the good fight so we can address these issues.
Yeah, I do know of several applications even for adults that are pretty, they still need work, I'll say that. But, they're pretty diagnostic, and at least I think that is a safe way for some people that have issues. If they can go on an app and see, just digital intelligence coming back to them saying, oh, you're reacting this way. And hopefully they are tools in the toolkit that will help us move forward in the future. And I know it's the tech is very new and needs to be, further developed. But I'm excited to. I didn't hear about the diagnosing by AI of young kids. I think that's great. Hopefully it's right.
Exactly. I'm encouraged. On one hand, you're like, who's this computer telling me, right? So
right,
with computers rule the world. But where I'm encouraged is, in 1999, 2000, early 2000s, there was a huge hesitancy to buy anything with a credit card over the internet. And now,
right.
That's pretty mundane. So it's just a natural progression. That's why I feel encouraged about it.
Yeah, no, I try to be optimistic as well, and who knows, maybe we won't be using credit cards at some point. Everything is cyclical, and there's many problems. I was just talking to a really dear friend yesterday who got totally hacked, and I was wondering, what's happened. We're usually in contact all the time, and he was hacked so bad that he had to go in hiding. So things are, just not all that stable in many places. And we just need to keep working, keep going forward and, trying to correct the ills. I mean, the amount of suicides and opioid deaths right now is just totally unacceptable. I mean, it's really scary.
One thing I do like about
one life is one life.
One thing I like about your site, Annie, is this one statement, and it reads, "Formal education will make a living. Self-education will make you a fortune," by the world-famous Jim Rohn. How did you get in touch with his teachings? Because it sounds like he resonated with you a lot, because I think it covers what we've been talking about this past hour. There's limitations with the formal education versus lifelong self-education.
I'm a huge advocate, and I'm so grateful for myself that it wasn't a real conscious thought at the time, but I'm so thankful for my self-education. So Jim Rohn, I was actually the manager for Herbalife's first millionaire, Jerry Satanovich, and she moved me over to Hawaii, which was great, and I got to spend, I guess about 5 years, traveling the islands and traveling with her. And Jim Rohn was hired by Herbalife exclusively, and seeing as I went with her everywhere, I got to see him over and over and over and over. A little bit of young Tony Robbins as well. And, yeah, he resonated with me. Also, it was after my sailing days, and one of his favorite sayings that he used in almost every speech was, set your sails and trim, for the best course in your life. That's not a direct quote, but, and I'm just going, oh, man, this is my guy, He's speaking my language. So he was pretty influential. And now I really, so the kids in Kenya, who I was bragging about, their curriculum is based mostly on Bob Proctor. And interestingly enough, Bob Proctor only has a high school degree. So, there's something going on. And Tony Robbins now is coming out with his KBB, and excuse me for not having the acronym completely translatable right now, and it's all about, we all have knowledge and we can get knowledge, and education needs to change, and we can't rely on our current education system. So I'm not the only one that's got it.
Sure.
And I'm not saying, throw away education, but just add the things that you just leave out and be fair and honest about, a lot of things right now I just don't believe should be happening, but I'm not elected to do something about it. So.
Well, it sounds like you can cover both ends. I mean, you're helping someone with their self-education and changing their outlook, and then once they get the financing, then you can sell them a house.
Yeah.
That's a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I am a very good realtor. It's not full time for me now. I'm spending more time doing, really. I feel like my legacy is more sharing my knowledge and doing what's right for people that I can help. And some of that is in real estate, and I really pride myself on how it's all about them. It's not about me, and that's how I do most things. And hopefully it pays off financially, which usually it does, honestly.
Absolutely. And so we are at the top of the hour, but I do want to take this time for you to talk about your book, and if they want to get in touch with you for buying a house potentially, and your other teaching. So if you can give out your website, social media, and all the above, that'd be great.
Okay. So I think you have my setyoursales.com, SAILS, not the other one. That is more for my books and coaching and speaking, and that currently has Jim Rohn quotes on it and soon to have mine. But I also have AnnieEvansRealty.com, and that's my real estate website, and I'm happy to help anybody, basically anywhere in California. And if anybody just wants advice on, because I was first licensed in real estate in 1979, and I've also been in architecture and construction and development, and all of those things I bring to the table to really help people with honesty and integrity. So, yeah, anybody that wants to reach out, even with questions that I can't really do anything about in Atlanta or Colorado, I'm here. And let's see, I am all over Facebook and LinkedIn and everything else, but I don't have, just Annie Evans is the way to find me. And there's many Annie Evanses, but I should show up pretty easily.
Awesome. Well, you have just been in tune to another episode of Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective. This is Hamza.
And I am David.
And it sounds like you have a long path ahead of you, Annie, so let's definitely stay in touch.
Yeah, no, let's do. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for letting me get it out there. I really appreciate it. You guys are doing a great thing.
Thank you so much.
And really nice to meet you.
Right.
Okay. Ciao
Cheers.
for now. Cheers.